She looked straight at the hands that had saved her life and told me they were too ugly to be seen in her wedding photos. Then she replaced me with another man. She thought all I would do was quietly accept it. She had no idea that every single dollar funding her dream wedding was under my control. And before this story was over, the wedding, the mansion, the fake family they built would all come crashing down. Before we dive in, if you've ever watched someone take kindness for weakness, only to regret it later, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe for more unforgettable Reddit revenge stories and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's get into today's story. People think heartbreak feels dramatic. Like you'll scream, cry, throw something across the room. That's Hollywood. Real heartbreak is much quieter, sometimes. It's sitting perfectly still while your own daughter tells an entire room full of strangers that she's ashamed of you. My name is Jack Reese. I'm 53 years old. I've lived in Cincinnati my entire life. I've survived industrial accidents, divorce, years of loneliness, and enough physical pain that most people wouldn't wish on their worst enemy. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened at my daughter's wedding tasting. The private dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Crystal glasses reflected the afternoon sunlight. Fresh flowers filled the air with the smell of lavender. White tablecloth stretched across polished oak tables. Every chair probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Across from me sat my daughter, Lauren, 25 years old. Beautiful, successful, everything I'd ever hoped she'd become. Beside her sat her fiancé. Next to him, his wealthy parents. Old Cincinnati money, the type of family that never had to ask how much something cost. Because they'd never worried about money a single day in their lives. My ex-wife Helen laughed loudly beside them. Her new husband Aiden leaned back confidently with one arm resting across her chair. He smiled like he already belonged in that family, like he'd always belonged there. Me. I sat quietly near the end of the table, exactly where people place someone they don't really want there. I ignored it. Parents do that. You convince yourself today isn't about you. It's about your child, then everything changed. The waiter placed another dish in front of us. I reached for my water glass. That's when Lauren looked down, not at my face, not into my eyes. At my right hand, I knew that look. I'd seen it thousands of times over the last 20 years. Curiosity, discomfort, pity. The skin across my hand wasn't really skin anymore, years earlier. A chemical explosion had melted it into thick scar tissue. My fingers never bent correctly again. Children stared, adults tried not to. Lauren swallowed. Dad, her voice was gentle. Almost rehearsed. I need to ask you something. The room became strangely quiet. Even the waiters seemed to disappear. She took a deep breath. I really don't want you to be upset. Whenever someone starts a sentence like that, they're about to hurt you, badly. She glanced toward Aiden, then back at me. The photographer wants close-up pictures during the ceremony. I nodded slowly. So, she hesitated. It's your hands, I frowned. My hands. There. She searched for the right word. Very noticeable. No, not noticeable. Scarred, ugly, disfigured. She didn't have to say it. Her face already had. Then came the sentence that replayed inside my head every night afterward. Dad, they'll ruin the wedding pictures. Silence, complete silence. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody defended me. Nobody even looked shocked. She continued. Aiden has really nice hands. She actually smiled when she said it. He'll walk me down the aisle instead. I stared at her, certain I'd misunderstood. What? The groom's family is very traditional. She rushed to explain herself. They're extremely high society. I don't want awkward photos. You'll still be there. You can sit in the back row just like that. 25 years of raising her. Thousands of lunches packed. Soccer games, doctor appointments, late-night fevers, homework, birthdays, every sacrifice. Reduced to, you can sit in the back. Nobody spoke. Not Helen, not Aiden. Not the groom, not his parents. Every single person simply waited to see how I'd react. I looked down at my hand. The same hand she'd just rejected. The same hand she'd called embarrassing without actually using the word. Then I quietly folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, stood up. I hope your wedding is everything you've dreamed of. That was all I said. No yelling, no insults, no scene. I simply walked away, behind me. Nobody tried to stop me. The drive home lasted 45 minutes. I don't remember a single traffic light or a single song. The radio stayed off. I just kept looking at my hand resting on the steering wheel. trying to see what she saw, trying to understand how the little girl who once called these hands her heroes now wished they didn't exist. By the time I reached my apartment, the silence felt heavier than concrete. I dropped my keys onto the kitchen counter, walked into my small spare room, opened an old cardboard box. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. There she was, 9 years old, holding a vanilla ice cream cone with one hand, and my scarred hand with the other. Smiling, proud, happy, like she never wanted to let go. I picked up the picture. And that's when 20 years of memories came crashing back all at once. People always ask if I'd do it again. If I could go back to that day, knowing exactly what it would cost me. Would I still jump? The answer has never changed, without hesitation, without regret. I'd do it again, 1,000,000 times over, because 20 years earlier, those hands weren't ugly. They were a shield. Back then, Lauren was 9. Every Saturday after my shift at the hydraulic manufacturing plant, I'd pick her up. She'd sprint across the parking lot yelling, "Daddy," like she'd been waiting forever. Didn't matter if I'd only been gone 8 hours. She'd launch herself into my arms. My coworkers loved watching it. Larry Boyd, one of the guys I'd worked beside for over a decade, used to laugh and say, "Jack, that little girl thinks you're Superman." Maybe I wasn't Superman. But to her, I was close enough. We had traditions. Every Saturday meant ice cream, always vanilla. No matter how many new flavors I tried convincing her to taste. She'd just wrinkle her nose and say, "Vanilla is perfect." Then she'd grab my hand, and we'd walk together through town. Sometimes she'd climb onto my shoulders. She'd wave at everyone like she was riding in a parade. Those were the happiest days of my life. I thought there would be thousands more. I was wrong. One Saturday changed everything. Payroll had made a mistake. Everyone needed to stop by the plant to collect paper checks. Lauren came with me. She'd visited dozens of times before. The workers adored her. She sat in the break room drawing pictures while I walked toward payroll. Then, I heard it, a deep metallic groan, not loud, not explosive, almost like the building itself was warning us. Then, boom, the entire factory shook. A hydraulic line exploded. Thousands of pounds of superheated chemical fluid burst through the air. People screamed, machines stopped. Metal crashed to the floor. Then I saw Lauren, still sitting exactly where I'd left her. Frozen, looking directly toward the blast. I didn't think, I didn't hesitate. My body moved before my brain did. I sprinted across the room, wrapped both arms around her, turned my back toward the explosion, and covered her with everything I had. The burning chemicals slammed into me. It felt like someone had poured molten metal across my skin. The pain wasn't immediate. Shock protects you, at least for a few seconds. Then, everything became fire. My hands, my arms, my back, every nerve screamed at once. But underneath me, Lauren was crying, alive, completely untouched. Not one drop had reached her, not one. Larry pulled her away while paramedics dragged me outside. The doctors later told me something I never forgot. If you'd been 1 second slower, she wouldn't have survived. 1 second. That's all that separated life from death. The surgeries lasted months. Skin grafts, rehabilitation, endless physical therapy, learning how to button a shirt again, learning how to hold a fork. Learning how to shake someone's hand without watching them stare first. My hands never recovered, but my daughter did. To me, that was enough, or at least, I thought it was 4 months later. Helen asked for a divorce, not because I cheated, not because I drank, not because I abused anyone, because, according to her, I was reckless. You brought Lauren into that factory. She refused to look at my bandaged hands. You endangered her. I stared at her. Helen, I saved her. I know what you did. Her voice stayed cold. But none of this would have happened if you hadn't taken her there. I realized something that day. People rewrite history when the truth becomes too painful to admit. It was easier for Helen to blame me than admit I had sacrificed everything for our daughter. She got custody. I got weekends, then every other weekend, eventually, less than that, and slowly. Lauren stopped remembering what had really happened. Or maybe she remembered. But someone kept telling her a different story. Years passed. The lawsuit against the company finally ended. Corporate negligence, unsafe equipment, ignored maintenance reports. The settlement was enormous, enough money to change my life forever. My lawyer smiled. Jack, you'll never have to work again. Instead, I created a trust, every single dollar protected, locked away for Lauren, her education, her first home, her wedding, her future children, everything. I kept working, still drove my old Chevy, still rented my small apartment, still fixed things myself, using the very hands she'd one day call embarrassing. I never touched a penny, not one. Because every dollar belonged to her, at least. That's what I believed. Years later, Helen remarried. His name was Aiden. Smooth talker, expensive suits, perfect smile. Always talking about investments, business opportunities, wealth management. He impressed everyone except me. There was something about him, something that felt manufactured. Like every conversation had been rehearsed. He paid unusual attention whenever money came up, especially Lauren's future inheritance. He'd ask casual questions. When does the trust release? Who controls it? How flexible is it? Too curious, much too curious, but I ignored the feeling. Because fathers don't like imagining predators around their daughters. Sometimes, we ignore the obvious until it's too late. Then came that wedding tasting. The one where my daughter chose another man over me. The one where she called my scars an embarrassment. The one that broke something inside me forever, that night. I sat alone holding an old photograph. My phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. Mr. Reese, a young woman sounded nervous. This is Becky from the wedding venue. I'm so sorry to bother you, but we're having trouble processing the final payment. I frowned. What kind of trouble? The attorney handling the trust informed us the transfer has been frozen. Frozen? I never froze anything. Then she said something that changed everything. Your ex-wife told us you'd fix it. She assumed. I was paying, of course she did. Everyone assumed I'd quietly fund the wedding, even after being pushed into the back row. I looked down at my scarred hands. For the first time, I stopped feeling ashamed of them. Instead, I remembered exactly what they'd sacrificed, and I made a decision. A decision that would change every single one of their lives. I took a slow breath, then calmly said, "Cancel the venue." The coordinator gasped. "Sir, you'll lose the entire deposit." "I know. It's over $40,000. I know. Are you absolutely certain?" I closed my eyes, then answered with the calmest voice I'd used in years. "Yes, cancel everything." I didn't sleep that night, not because I regretted my decision, because I knew the phone would ring, and when it did, everything would finally be out in the open. It happened the next morning. 7:14 a.m. Lauren's name flashed across my phone. I let it ring twice before answering. Part of me wanted to know if my hands would shake. They didn't. "Dad," her voice was frantic. "What did you do?" "The venue called Mom. They said you canceled everything. They said you told them to cancel the wedding." I stirred my oatmeal without saying a word. "It's true." Silence. "Then why?" I closed my eyes because for one brief moment, I almost became the father I'd always been. The man who fixed every problem. The man who apologized even when he wasn't wrong. The man who sacrificed, again and again and again, but that man had finally reached his limit. "You told me to sit in the back row," I said quietly. "I'm simply giving you more room," she gasped. "Dad, that's cruel." Cruel, that word hit harder than I expected. Cruel. These hands had protected her from burning chemicals. These hands had worked overtime so she could go to college. These hands had built every opportunity she'd ever received. And now, I was the cruel one. "No, Lauren, my cruelty would have been letting you believe actions don't have consequences. I'm finished." Then I ended the call, not angrily, calmly, for the first time in years. I felt something I'd forgotten existed. Peace. Monday morning, I met with my attorney. David Finch had represented me for almost 20 years, the moment I walked into his office. He knew something had changed. "You look different." I finally stopped feeling guilty, he nodded slowly. I was wondering when that day would come. I handed him the trust documents. "I want every wedding distribution frozen immediately." He looked at me. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he smiled. "Then let's protect what's yours." David spent less than an hour reviewing recent paperwork, then his expression changed. "Jack, did you authorize this?" He turned a document toward me. My stomach tightened. At the bottom was my signature, or something pretending to be my signature. Someone had forged it perfectly, almost, except I'd signed legal documents for decades. I recognized every tiny difference. The pressure, the angle, the spacing. It wasn't mine. "What is it?" David looked at me. Someone used your daughter's trust as collateral. What? They guaranteed a commercial business loan? Without your permission, I stared at him. That's impossible. He slowly shook his head. Not impossible. Illegal. Everything suddenly made sense. Aiden, his questions, his sudden interest in Lauren's inheritance. The expensive lifestyle, the luxury cars, the giant house. None of it had been paid for, it had been borrowed, against money. That wasn't his, and he'd counted on me staying quiet long enough to never notice. He underestimated one thing. He thought I'd keep sacrificing forever. He was wrong. David immediately contacted the bank within 48 hours. The fraud department launched an investigation. By Wednesday, accounts were frozen, loans were suspended, credit lines disappeared. Then, the dominoes started falling. The florist called. Payment rejected. The caterer called. Payment rejected. The wedding planner called. Payment rejected. The DJ, the photographer, the decorator, every invoice came back the same. Insufficient funds. The dream wedding began collapsing one vendor at a time. Instead of calling me, Helen decided to go to war. She recorded a crying video. Perfect makeup, perfect lighting, perfect performance. My ex-husband is destroying our daughter's wedding because another man is walking her down the aisle. Thousands of strangers believed her. Comments flooded in. Monster, narcissist, worst father ever. I read exactly 3 comments, then closed the app because strangers only know the story they're given. But Helen made one fatal mistake. She tagged the groom's wealthy family. The Werners, old money, old reputation, old rules. Families like that don't enjoy public drama. They eliminate it, quietly. The moment they saw words like fraud, bank investigation, forged documents, everything changed. Thursday afternoon, David called. They found it. What? The forged signature. The bank confirmed it. And he smiled. They've referred the case to federal investigators. I leaned back in my chair. After 20 years, justice had finally knocked. Not loudly, quietly, professionally, relentlessly. That same evening, my neighbor Killian knocked on my apartment door. She held up her phone. You need to see this. Helen had deleted every single social media post, every accusation, every video. Every comment gone. What happened? Killian grinned. The groom's family threatened legal action. They want absolutely nothing to do with this mess. For the first time, I smiled. Not because they were suffering, because the truth was finally louder than the lies. The following Monday, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't David, it was Peggy, Helen's older sister. We hadn't spoken in almost 10 years. Her voice trembled. Jack, I probably shouldn't be calling, but someone has to tell you. I sat down. What happened? There was a long pause. Then she whispered, Aiden ran. I frowned. Ran. He packed a suitcase, emptied his closet, left before sunrise. He knew the investigators were coming. I closed my eyes. So he abandoned them. Yes, Helen woke up to an empty house and federal investigators at the front door. For several seconds, I said nothing, not because I was celebrating. Because somehow, I wasn't surprised. Men like Aiden love luxury. They don't love consequences. The next piece fell only 2 days later. The groom called off the wedding. Not because he suddenly cared about me. Not because he discovered the truth. Because scandal is expensive, and his family protected their reputation above everything else. Lauren wasn't just marrying into money. She was marrying into image. The moment that image cracked, they walked away. No arguments, no second chances, no dramatic speeches. Just one short phone call. We wish you the best. And that was it. The wedding was over. 3 weeks passed. Life became strangely quiet. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner. Watched baseball for the first time in years. My life felt peaceful. Then one Tuesday evening, someone knocked. I already knew who it was. Some instincts never leave you. I opened the door. Lauren stood there, beside her. Helen. Neither looked anything like they had at that wedding tasting. Lauren's designer clothes had been replaced with jeans and an oversized hoodie. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Helen looked exhausted, older somehow, like 3 weeks had stolen 10 years. Jack, Helen whispered. Can we come in? I stepped aside. Not because they deserved kindness, because I deserved closure. Nobody spoke for almost a minute. Finally, Lauren broke. She slid off the couch, onto her knees. Dad, I'm sorry. The words barely came out. I'm so sorry. Tears streamed down her face. The venue, the house, Aiden, everything's gone. I didn't know. He lied to me. He forged your name. I swear I didn't know. She reached toward me, then stopped, almost afraid to touch me. Please, please release the trust. We'll lose everything. Helen started crying too. Jack, we have nowhere to go. I looked at both of them. 20 years earlier, I had lain in a hospital bed, both arms wrapped in bandages, unable to hold a spoon, unable to button my own shirt, unable to sleep without pain. Nobody had knelt beside my bed. Nobody begged for me. Nobody asked what I needed. Instead, they blamed me. Lauren wiped her eyes, then quietly said something I hadn't expected. I remember Saturdays. My heart skipped. I remember the ice cream. I remember riding on your shoulders. She looked up at me. She stopped. The room became silent. I waited. She opened her mouth again. Nothing. She couldn't say it. She couldn't admit what those hands had done for her. Not even now, not even after everything. That hurt more than every scar I carried. I slowly stood, walked over to the dining table, placed both hands flat on the wood. Scarred, twisted, shiny, impossible to ignore. Then I looked directly into my daughter's eyes. You said these hands would ruin your wedding pictures. She began crying harder. I continued. These hands carried you. They fed you. They worked overtime so you could have opportunities I never had. These hands protected you from a wall of burning chemicals. I paused. They're the only reason you're alive. The room went completely still. Lauren covered her mouth. Helen couldn't even look at me. Then I said the words I'd carried inside me for 20 years. I saved your life once. I won't save it again. Lauren broke, not dramatically, not loudly. She simply buried her face in her hands and cried, real tears, not because she'd lost the wedding. Not because she'd lost the mansion, but because, for the first time, she finally understood. What she'd thrown away. Unfortunately, understanding doesn't erase consequences. I walked toward the window, outside. The city continued exactly as it always had. Cars drove past. Children laughed somewhere nearby. A dog barked in the distance. Life kept moving. It always does. Behind me, Helen whispered one last time, Jack, please. I never turned around. Instead, I quietly closed the curtains. That was my answer. They left a few minutes later. No yelling. No insults, no threats, just silence. Sometimes, silence hurts more than words ever could. Within a month, the house was gone. The bank foreclosed. Aiden was eventually arrested after investigators tracked him across state lines. Multiple fraud charges followed. Everything he'd built had been built on lies. And lies eventually collapse under their own weight. The trust remained exactly where it belonged, protected, untouched. My attorney rewrote every document from that day forward. No boyfriend, no husband, no family member would ever be able to use it again. Only Lauren, if she ever learned how to stand on her own. People still ask me whether I regret anything. I don't. I'd still throw myself in front of that explosion. I'd still save my little girl, every single time. Because fathers don't save their children expecting gratitude. They do it because love doesn't ask for guarantees, but love, without respect, eventually becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice, without appreciation, eventually comes to an end. These hands may never look beautiful, but every scar tells the story of a father who loved his daughter enough to burn. The only thing they never did was apologize for saving her. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more unforgettable Reddit revenge stories, and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were Jack? I'll see you in the next story.